For our last question, we will begin with Mr. Blevins. Will the new Consumer Protection Agency help or hurt business?
We don't know all the effects of the new Consumer Protection Agency because within that piece of legislation, the Financial Reform Bill, there are still many regulations that have yet to be drafted. I do think, however, that this piece of legislation has taken a kitchen table issue and made it a congressional one. By that I mean with the Financial Reform Bill, it takes the decision out of my hands and out of your hands as to how we borrow money from purchasing a car to buying a house, and it lets the government decide in what boundaries and context that should be done. It also has the capability to freeze up the financial liquidity that we need in today's struggling economy. So I think that the bill was a knee-jerk reaction, and I do believe that it's going to be more detrimental than helpful to our nation.
Thank you, Mr. Blevins. Congressman Bocheri.
Well, I couldn't disagree more. We're going to turn the country back over to the Wall Street banks that led us into this economic mess, where we found them betting on the price of fuel going up. We found them betting on the price of fuel going up and food going up. We saw them betting against Americans who were struggling to pay their mortgage. They actually took bets that you were going to fail to pay your mortgage and then took insurance out to pay for that. Now, we hear all this talk about repeal. Are we going to repeal and put the credit card companies back in power and make sure that they can charge you whatever they like, even though you're paying your bill off? Are we going to make sure that we hold in account the Wall Street folks? You know, that bill was about making sure that taxpayers never have to fund a bailout for the big banks on Wall Street. And it's making sure that our economic and financial institutions work for all of us. After all, your 401ks are there. Your pensions are there. We need to make sure that that Consumer Protection Agency is up and running so that consumers have better access. What I'd also like to see is an expansion to make sure that we're inspecting these goods that come into America. You know, it doesn't give me great comfort when my boy's playing with one of those toy trains that were made in China. They're using lead paint and using chemicals that, you know, maybe necessarily we don't agree with here. We need broader enforcement and inspection of those goods coming in from China and around the globe to make sure that consumers have better access to these protections. I would not repeal that. I think both my challengers have taken that position. I think that would be a mistake. We need to make sure that we have a strong, robust financial system, but one that works for us and not against us.
Thank you. Mr. Renacci.
Yes, when it comes to the Consumer Protection Agency and some of the regulations that were passed, I believe this. Number one, we didn't take care of one of the biggest problems, which was Freddie and Fannie. We didn't do anything with that. We also added policies that make, in many cases, too big to fail. Those are problems. Look, this country, we talked about entrepreneurship. We talked about the ability. One of the things in a capitalist market, which we have, is that there are failures. And what we have done here, in many cases, is didn't take a good look at some of the things that did cause some of these failures, Fannie and Freddie. We didn't take a look at that. I agree with this. If somebody in Wall Street did something improper, they should be persecuted to the nth degree. But we need to be able to get government to step back in many of these cases. You heard Mr. Bocheri say, and I always love that analysis, that he just wants to be the referee that throws the flag in. The problem with what we have with our big government today is they want to stand on the sidelines, but sometimes they want to go in and replace the quarterback. Sometimes they want to go in and actually tackle somebody instead of standing on the sidelines and letting free business go. These type of acts are nothing but additional issues and problems that the federal government needs to be able to back away from. And again, we did not correct the biggest problem, which is the Fannie and Freddie Mae issue.
Thank you. As we now move to the next segment of the evening, each candidate will be giving a closing statement. Again, the order of statements was determined by lots before the evening began. I would also like to mention that we thank Clear Picture Cable TV that is taping the event this evening, and it will be replayed periodically for those who have access to our cable station between now and the election time. The first closing statement will be given by Mr. Blevins, then followed by Congressman Bocheri, and then lastly Mr. Radesi. So Mr. Blevins.
Thank you. I'd like to thank the Chamber of Commerce, the Coalition, Congressman Bocheri and Mr. Radesi for being here this evening. Most importantly, I'd like to thank all of you for being here and giving us your time tonight. Now, as I reflect on America and the mess that we're in, I find it odd that Republicans always blame Democrats and Democrats always blame Republicans. Obama blames Bush. I blame me. I blame me because as a voter, I continually voted for a two-party system that has learned to manipulate the voters. A duopoly that puts its own self-interest ahead of American interests. I got into this race because I felt I had a responsibility to restore American principles and expose the political mechanisms that not only threaten our standard of living, but the quality of life for our kids and our grandchildren. This political mechanism also threatens the last bastion of freedom that exists upon this earth. I got into this race because I felt an obligation to defend the document that recognizes that our rights are not granted to us by the state, but instead are inalienable and endowed upon us by our Creator. Our Constitution doesn't even recognize the political oligarchy that we have too long endured. A political oligarchy that, if left unchecked, threatens our fiscal health, our civil liberties, and most importantly, the dream of freedom that had been fought so valiantly for hundreds of years by mankind. I think it's time we take our nation back, not as libertarians, and not as Democrats, not as Republicans, but as Americans. So I just want to stand here tonight once more and tell you that I truly believe together we can turn America back in the right direction. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Blevins. Congressman Bocheri.
Thank you. I want to thank the people of Wayne County for the absolute honor to serve you in Washington, D.C. as your representative. There may be issues we agree on, some we disagree on, but one thing is certain, we're all Americans. You know, I've taken a lot of trips outside the borders of our country as an Air Force officer and a pilot. And every time I go out of the borders, I understand how good we have it here as a country. Whether I was delivering food to people in Africa, I didn't know if they're going to be alive from one day to the next, or flying our wounded and fallen soldiers out of Baghdad. We have a great country. It's our country. And right now she's hurting. And it's going to take all of us coming together to make certain that we move this country forward. We have a lot of challenges that we're facing. A lot of challenges that were not by my design. When I walked through the door day one, we were faced with an economy that was in free fall. We were faced with exploding deficits and 2 unfunded, undeclared wars that were paid for by borrowed money from China. This election is about a choice. Do we want to go back to the same policies that have allowed us to get us into this mess? You heard my opponent today, Mr. Radesi, talk. In fact, I counted 14 times he had mentioned the word Pelosi and Obama. But one word I didn't hear him say was you, the people of Wayne County. Another word I didn't hear him say is Congressman Ralph Regula. Congressman Ralph Regula was a moderate. He served for 36 years with honor in our Congress. And some of the positions you've heard tonight are even farther away than Congressman Regula. On trade, he voted against NAFTA. He was making sure that we made the right investments in our people. And one thing that I've learned by being handed the keys to government, because when I served in the state legislature, I was always in the minority. I've had a sense of maturity. And that maturity is that when you're handed the keys to government, you can make all the promises you want when you run for office. You can promise this, you can promise lower taxes, but when you're handed the keys to government, it's about choices. And what choices are we going to make today? When I look at young Jay Hawkins out there, all the pundits are saying, you know, this health care vote, Congressman Bocheri, may cost you the job. I want to look at Jay today and I want to say, Jay, you're worth it, buddy. You're worth it. And I want you to know that some of the decisions we have to make are very complex and challenging. But we run for office not just to win elections. I've already proven I can do that. I ran for office because I want to get things done. Our country deserves it, and you deserve it. And our country is stronger when we grow it, when we build it, and when we assemble it here. If you give me another term, I'm going to make sure that I go to Washington, be the moderate that I promised I would be, to make sure that we enact policies that are going to make our country stronger, that invest in people, that invest in our institutions that we have come to love and honor, like Ohio Ag Research and Development Center. That's what makes our country stronger. And the people of this country can be proud because men and women are putting their life on the line so that you have the ability to exercise your choice this November. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Renacci.
Well, again, I want to thank the Wooster Chamber, and I want to thank all of you here this evening, because this is part of the American system of getting to understand who your candidates are and getting a better understanding of each of their ideas and policies. In 45 days, or less than 45 days now, you're going to have to make a choice. The choice is pretty simple. If you like the way things are, if you like your congressman, and I'm going to say it again, following Nancy Pelosi 94% of the time.
15 times.
If you like that, if you like the unbridled spending, if you like the unemployment rate towering and doubling in this district, this is a gentleman you need to vote for. But if you want a different person, if you want somebody who's lived the American dream, if you want somebody who understands what it is to make a payroll, if you want somebody who's created over 1,500 jobs, if you want somebody who's had to sit around with workers at a Chevy dealership and tell them, I'm going to stand with you as we continue to fight big government taking over, if you want somebody like that, I'm the person you should vote for. Now let me tell you this. Mr. Boccieri here has stood in front of you once already in the last 2 years, and he told you, I will not vote for cap and trade. And yet he went down to Washington and he voted for cap and trade. He also told you, I will not vote for health care the first time around because it's too expensive. Yet when it got to a point where the vote was needed, Mr. Boccieri voted for health care. Mr. Boccieri has lied to you twice. And if he's lied to you twice, and if you believe, you can't even believe what he's saying in the future. So here's what I would say to you. As I say, you do have your choice. But Mr. Boccieri fooled us 2 years ago. That's one of the reasons I'm running. He fooled everyone here 2 years ago. Don't be fooled on November 2nd, 2010. I hope I have your support. Thank you very much.
On behalf of the coalition, I wish to thank each of the candidates for their help this evening. Also thanks to the school for the facility and to all of the other coalition members who worked hard to bring this together. Please remember to vote.